So for those of you that haven't signed up, especially you Canadians on the call, we have again our annual Canadian Summit where we feature brands, advertisers, decision makers. It's going to be at the Scotiabank Theatre, June 16th in Toronto. For those of you that don't know, KJ or Kevin Johnson is now the CEO of Group M Canada, one terrific guy. He's also on the DPAA Diversity Board. Brenda runs all marketing for Visa. And then Trin runs marketing for Harry Rosen, a very wonderful series of upscale men's stores in Canada. And we will be doing a bit of a fashion show from Harry Rosen amongst the speakers. So stay tuned and don't send any pictures, but you can take them when you're there. So if you want to use the QR code, right to the side of Trin, who also will be joining us at Cannes Lions this year. There is a barcode that gives you all the information, a QR code. In addition, as I mentioned, Cannes, we have one heck of a lineup. We'll have about 20 personal private chat meetings in our private sessions where I will do fireside chats with some amazing CMOs of these brands, chief brand officers of these brands, CEOs of these agencies, and other decision makers, where all of our membership will learn what brands want and like about out of home and digital out of home and programmatic out of home, what it will take to spend more, what they like, what they don't like. And everybody at Cannes Lions will get a chance to interact with these major players in a wonderful private setting on the Sud de France. Kumba, Sud de France in Anglais, what does that mean? Kumba? You fell off?
France. Sud de la France.
Right, that means the south part of France. Thank you. Merci. Tu es très gentil. Please join us. If you haven't signed up, we do a whole week trip with all of these meetings. They're wonderful. We also will have the digital out-of-home cocktail party with Yahoo, our board member. We will also be having the out-of-home dinner and a series of meetings, plus some other fun, a little bit of rosé and a little bit of some time on the Côte d'Azur. That'll be in a boat, and lunch or déjeuner aussi. So please join us. If you haven't signed up, talk to Noah Class. You all know who he is, or email him here. We have so far 33 C-level members of DPAA coming on this wonderful trip where you just gain amazing relationships, experience with top brands, top decision makers, etc., etc. Then we've come back now to Jonathan Frangakis, the founder of Mira, ex-US or continuing Marine, because I think you're still on inactive duty. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jonathan, and tell the nice group here what's going on and how we can measure moving ads. Thank you. All yours, Jonathan.
All right. See if I can avoid your pitfalls, Barry. How's that look?
Looks great. You got it, man.
All right, good. So what I'm covering today is what a four-prop study is, which I'd like to sort of put out there as the gold standard in out-of-home measurement, and not necessarily, Mira branded. I'm trying to find the page that I can. Here we go. But just generally, what a four-prop incremental lift analysis is. So just a little bit of background on us. Mira was founded in 2014 by my brother and I. We're effectively the first analytics and performance measurement platform for the out-of-home industry. We didn't develop the four-prop study by any means. That's essentially what's used in clinical trials today, and a bunch of other lift analysis applications. But as it applies to out-of-home, we sort of figured out how to wedge it in there. And then we introduced moving out-of-home measurement back in 2016 using this sort of same rigorous methodology. And then happy news for us was back in September, we were acquired by Reveal Mobile. And today, Mira is essentially still, operating almost as a company, but it's effectively the out-of-home suite of products for Reveal. So a little bit about us. So I think you guys probably hear something to this effect on most of these, just on the ones that I've watched. I think that, we all kind of start with something, particularly if we're talking about measurement. But I just wanted to sort of jump into this. I feel it bears mentioning at very least. We believe that, so you measure what matters. And the reason that you measure out of home is because the way we look at it is out of home is effectively like a customer acquisition channel for brick and mortar retail or for QSR, whatever the physical store, the physical brick and mortar application is. There is no, form of Instagram that you can click on an ad and end up, inside of a retail location. So out of home is essentially the last touch of how you are getting people into a store, and thus it should be measured like a customer acquisition channel. But additionally, so that's a physical world conversion environment. For these digital conversion environments like in-app and web visitation, there should be something similar to this, because as I can prove to you empirically, out of home does go a long way to driving these lower funnel metrics. And so we should have something at least commensurate. It doesn't have to be identical to what's in digital, but in these for out of home to be measured in a similar way to these digital channels. And it needs to be done across all formats, obviously, traditional, place-based, moving, programmatic, it doesn't matter. We should be measuring out of home so sort of the same way across these different formats. So when we talk about out of home measurement, let's just set a definition real quick to, again, level set. What we're trying to do is understand the impact that exposure to out of home has on some action someone takes, whether that be in the real world, like walking into a brick and mortar location, or digitally, like I said, an event inside of an app, or downloading an app, or visiting a website, or buying something on a website. So these are the different conversion types, I'll define conversion environments in a few moments, and obviously same thing holds across all out of home formats. So purpose of this slide is to really lay out measurement in out of home as having two sides of it. And every time I say measurement, Dylan, don't bristle. I mean performance measurement in out of home. I saw you.
I take no offense.
Okay, good.
I'm glad we're all getting in this practice of clarifying what measurement means. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So performance-based measurement of out of home. I'm gonna disclaim the rest of the time that I say measurement is that's what I mean. And so you can really break this up into two sort of like distinct sides of the puzzle here. And one is the exposure environment. And this is where, where we are generating the exposed group from. So this is people that are exposed to out of home. And on the other side of the story here, we have the conversion environment. And that's the metric that we're trying to measure, what we're trying to get people to convert to. And it's sitting in between that is a device graph. And that's so that we can match exposure events to conversion events. Pretty simple, but I just want to make sure that, as I start to throw these terms around in later slides, we're thinking about it all the same way. And so these are the different conversion environments that we focus on. There are obviously others, and we've even worked in others, but these are sort of like the off-the-shelf conversion environments that I think you'll find. Web visitation, as I mentioned, this is where we're placing a property pixel on a website. We can put it on all the pages and make it sort of an engagement pixel, or you can put it on a checkout complete page and make it a purchase. So we're measuring like how did out of home affect purchase on that website, and then everything in between could be requesting a demo or whatever it is. We're placing pixels across the website as they correlate to different goals. In-app events, we do this via SDK postbacks, where we have integrations with, AppsFlyer, Tune, Adjust, Kochava, Spring. I feel like I'm leaving one or two out, but essentially think of this as like a pixel for in-app events. So if we want to understand how does out of home drive people to download an app, or place a bet on an app, or search for something in an app, this is the in-app event conversion environment. Store visitation, pretty straightforward. We use a POI database, and the same data that we're using to measure out-of-home exposure is now the same data used to measure that conversion environment. And then finally, brand sentiment or brand surveys. We don't do the user-targeted one anymore, but one that we'll see a lot is this general market survey. But these are the different applications or the different conversion environments in which we operate sort of off the shelf. There's additional ones like TV tune-in, which we've done studies for, A few other ones as well, but these are the main four I think that you'll probably see across the industry. So let's start with exposure. Basically, the way that exposure, because this is essentially the first building block to measuring out of home, is understanding who was exposed to it. So the way we do it is we have a user base of about 70 million daily active users in the US with pretty high fidelity. And this is location data. This is date and timestamps, mobile advertising IDs. So we get an understanding of how the population moves throughout the physical world. This is overlaid with either a media plan or waypoints if it's moving, if the out of home is moving, and then digital play logs if it's digital. So all of this to say, we are trying to understand as precisely as we can who was exposed to an out of home campaign based on their MAIDs, their mobile advertising IDs. And so this is where the 4-prop methodology basically starts. Once we have a group of exposed users, we can then generate a lookalike audience. And we're creating this lookalike audience across a bunch of different demographic attributes, things like gender, age, household income, urbanicity, cost of living, presence of children, marital status, a bunch of different demographic attributes, as well as some technical ones, like we want to have the same fidelity in devices. We want to see devices the same amount in the control and exposed group, different, the user agent, for example. So some technical attributes and then geography. And so basically what we have at the end of this process is we have the exposed group, which is a group of people that were exposed to a campaign. And then we have a synthetic control, which is a group of people that look very similar to that exposed group with one key difference, that they were not exposed to the campaign. And this essentially gives us a baseline behavior of how people who weren't exposed would behave as it relates to this conversion environment. And so you can compare these two. You can say that, exposed group converted at a 1% conversion rate, the control group converted at a 0.8% conversion rate, and that's a 25% increase in conversions. And that can get you a little bit down the road to understanding what the impact of out-of-home exposure was on that conversion metric. But that's one dynamic there. So that's, comparing control versus exposed, that would effectively be a 2-prop, but we're talking about 4 props. So let's find out what the other 2 are. So we feel it is not necessarily enough to just look at control versus exposed. So we also take a look at, and this is what effectively a 4-prop study does, is understanding the pre and the post behavior. So this is in order to control for time-dependent variables. So when you have, for example, different media weight, additional media weight in the market, or there's some seasonality aspect to it. What we're trying to understand is how the control group and how the exposed group behaved before being exposed and after being exposed. And what we're going to do with that information is we're going to measure what's called the difference of differences, the change in the control group and the change in the exposed group. And the difference in those two is going to be the net lift. So what this graphic here is showing is in the pre-period, the control and the exposed have very similar conversion rates. If X is the X-axis is time, the Y-axis is conversion rate in this graph here. You see in the pre-period, they move along, not identical, they'll never be exactly the same, but they're pretty similar conversion rates. And then at the start of the campaign, in this particular example, we see them both start to increase. But what we want to find, what we hope to see, the hypothesis we're trying to test is, does the exposed group increase at a steeper slope than the control group? And so that difference in slopes, that difference at the end of those 2 lines that you see there, that is the net lift. That is like the distilled impact that being exposed to out-of-home had on that population. So again, these are the 4 observations that we make, which is why we call it a 4-prop. These 4 properties are, and if you look at it, it's similar to an A/B test. If you were going to call it that, it would technically be like an AAA/B test, because only one of these groups actually gets the treatment. So you have the control group before the campaign started, and then during campaign, we're measuring the difference in those 2 quantities. And then the exposed group or the test group before they were exposed to after they were exposed, and we're measuring the difference in those two in those two values. So that's where we get the idea of a 4-prop analysis. The post-test being the only one who actually received a treatment, because pre-test hasn't necessarily been exposed yet, and the control is never exposed. And those are essentially the tenets of how we do a 4-prop study. I'm not going to get very salesy with this and go through too much of what our console looks like, but suffice it to say, we try to create something where you can set up one of these studies in a pretty easy manner, and generate a pixel if you want, or a property ID or a goal ID for if you're doing an SDK postback, upload POIs if we're doing foot traffic. So we can do this all of this essentially inside of our console, and get that result that we're looking at. Our goal in this is to essentially be an arbiter of just this unbiased third party, just an arbiter of the truth, an arbiter of like how a campaign actually performed. And we feel this is the most effective way of doing that. And I'm just going to go through a few sample insights to sort of help solidify this. I gather that this can be, just talking about it for a few years now, it can be a little nebulous the first time you hear about it. And I think the graphics can sometimes ground this a little bit. So in this example, you see the control and exposed. The reason it's a point and not a trend is because we're essentially taking averages of the two periods. So, very similar conversion rates in the control and exposed pre-period, right? We can see 9.63 and 9.49. But then what happened was the control that reduced by, what is that, about 20% reduction ish in that neighborhood. But the exposed group increased by 30-ish%, roughly. So what that gives us is the baseline activity was a decrease in, let's call it, website visitation. So the average population would have visited less over this period of time, but the out-of-home exposed group actually increased more. So the net impact of out-of-home on that particular conversion metric was close to a 50% increase in likelihood to convert, or whether it's engage or convert, whatever the metric is. This one's a pretty similar one, except the difference here is we're showing it with confidence. And so what I mean by that is how confident we are in each one of these results. And typically what we're looking for, so you can see in this one, we have a 52% increase, and the confidence level is above 50% on this. Actually, the next one shows a little better. This one we're breaking out by market. You can see how two different markets had performed. But in this one here, typically what we're looking for is a 95% confidence interval or confidence level. And so what we see on this one is, you can see all the way to the left, the all category had a confidence of you could see the confidence interval is positive, meaning that that shaded green area is above 0. So we are confident if we ran this test 1 million more times, 95% of the time, at least, we feel that you will get a similar positive result. Now, if you look all the way over to the purchases goal, so in a lot of cases, the purchase goal is going to have fewer conversions than the engagement goal, than the engagement goal. You'll see that the confidence actually dips below 0%, so that would make it statistically insignificant. So it did not reach that 95% confidence interval. And so we would essentially report those results as a wash. You could get something directional out of it a lot of times, but when you see the confidence interval dip below 0, that's when you essentially report that as a null or NA or insignificant. And then again, avoiding getting very salesy here, but trusted by a few important brands and buyers and supply side relationships there. But so I will stop right there because I said a lot of stuff and I'm hearing myself talk now, realizing I'm not sure that I actually took a breath that entire time. I'm trying to keep it inside of the 15 or 20 minutes that we were talking about. So let me stop here and see what questions there are, if there's any I can answer.
Jonathan, very good, Jonathan. Look, out-of-home works, and this demonstrates that the attribution, there's real ROI going on. We could tell where this lift. I have one question to start. And let's get everybody back on screen. Nicely done, Jonathan. You did it quickly and succinctly, and you were pithy and worked. So let me ask you, deprecation of cookies is happening, and we all know that. And to some degree, that's actually helped the out-of-home, the digital out-of-home world, because the context is coming much more to the forefront as people are realizing the true importance of context. Does the deprecation of cookies in any way hinder your capabilities or abilities?
Yeah, I think so. The deprecation of cookies has an impact mainly in the area of the device graph. So we use mobile devices to understand who is exposed, but we obviously want to capture a conversion if it happens on that person's laptop, if we're driving to a website or something along those lines. So that's where you would see the impact. Lucky for us, our device graph relies mainly on residential IP. So these devices are graphed back to a household
through the cable or the Wi-Fi in the home, right?
Yeah, essentially, everybody's Wi-Fi router in their house has an IP address, and then we see, you can associate a maid to a household based on the residential IP if you can map those.
Great. All right, Bob Corkery. Hey, Bob, glad you're here. Jonathan, what's the accuracy of location for 70 million users?
95% of our location events are within 10 meters horizontal accuracy, which I believe is 6 decimal, it might be 5 decimal places, or it might be 7 decimal places in that area. And then we have some like wholly inaccurate data, which we don't necessarily use for exposure or foot traffic conversion, but there is use for that a lot of times when you're doing, for example, some census block group analytics. So we don't throw all of it out. We do have some less accurate data, but 95% falls in that 10 meter plus accuracy.
Excellent. Bob, as you all know, is running sales for Coinstar and doing a lot of business over there. That's great. We usually have Chris Riley or Eric Sherman, always giving you guys a chance to weigh in. So feel free if you got any questions. In the meantime, Jonathan, did you say you're talking about the accuracy on vertical, not horizontal, right?
No, horizontal accuracy.
Accuracy, okay.
Yeah, we don't purport to understand elevation or anything like we can't tell if somebody's on this subway platform or standing above it, nor can we tell if on the first floor of the mall or the first.
Yeah, that's always been a challenge in the malls. I know, that's why I was just curious. Yeah,
Beacons failed in their promise to deliver on that piece, so
that would be the headline. Chris, always like to hear from our friend from Oz, or Eric, or anybody else have any questions for Jonathan?
No, Barry, we engaged with Jonathan and his team in detail and understood it. It's a great system.
Excellent.
I would just hop in and say this is, great to see. I think a lot of folks in this space spend a lot of time talking about the quality of the data. I love how Jonathan talked about the quality of his methodology, pre-post test control or difference of differences or for prop, whatever you want to call it. It's a smart way to do it. So glad to see it.
Well done. Thank you for that, Eric. Well done, Jonathan. I see Joel put a long comment. Joel, would you like to mention that? Because if I read it, I'll get lost. It's very small on my screen. That's Joel Koppler. Do you want to weigh in and mention that verbally?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Barry. I was just wondering, Jonathan, when it comes to these types of studies, when we're thinking about the programmatic space, in a lot of cases, we have clients increasingly spending in that space, and they're looking for those types of same metrics that you're providing, or you demonstrated the ability to provide. We've seen when we've done studies like this, that we see the confidence in some of the data start to suffer when we have smaller campaigns. That makes sense. So when we have programmatic campaigns, it might be hyper targeted, which allow a client to spend less money as a basket for a campaign. How can we start to bring these types of studies within that space and allow confidence to remain in that type of data?
I had a note to mention this at the beginning, but I was nervous about which joke Barry was going to tell about me, so I kind of forgot my opening notes here. but yeah, so I think let me mention that it's certainly not a study you can do for every type of campaign. You're right, the smaller regional ones will pose a problem. And the reason is scale of the sample. So it's when you're determining, like, a question we'll get all the time is, how many impressions do I need to allocate in order to measure statistically significant lift? Well, the answer is I have no idea if there is a lift that we can measure. So it really comes down to, like, our answer is, at this level, we feel if there is a statistically significant lift, we will be able to detect it. And so that number out the door, easy home run, is going to be 10 million, 10 million effectively geopath impressions, right? That's what we look for. I will tell you, though, we measure significantly smaller than that, because there are three main variables when you get into, like, statistical significance. The one is the number of observations. That's the number of impressions. On the other side of that, you also have the number of conversions that you're seeing. So, if a website gets 50,000 hits, it's much more likely to understand, increase in web visitation than a website that gets 10. And then the final one, which is actually one of the biggest factors and the most unpredictable one, is the magnitude of the lift. So we looked at industry benchmarks to say, in this type of environment with this type of format, these are the lifts that we'll expect to see. So when it goes below 10 million, we always look at those things. But we use 10 million as an out the door, you'll be good. If there is a lift, we're going to be able to measure it. But on these smaller campaigns, it's got to be, it's got to be the right, it's got to be the right product. In terms of, like, vertical for a benchmark, and it has to be, the right magnitude and of visitation or conversion events prior to treatment.
Let's jump to Dylan, from size of measurement in campaigns to actual size of campaigns. Dylan.
I think it was basically similar to what Joel was asking, of,
Yeah.
like, what is sort of the threshold of saying where you're confident that this is applicable and accessible to people. But yeah, I mean, you basically said, 10 million, you're very confident that you're not going to have any problem coming to some good conclusion on it, but not to say that you can't with a smaller campaign.
Yeah, I mean, we've done them with as small as 2 million. I believe we've probably dipped below 1 million. But it was like, the right benchmark, for, is like, a betting app using, moving out of home or something like that, like, which we know from the past that has been successful and had a large lift, and they had tons of, conversion events. So it makes it very easy for us to say, like, yeah, we think it'll look like this, and thus we think you should proceed. But we'll always, I think the responsible thing is to sort of do that feasibility analysis before the campaign, if for nothing else, to manage expectations of the client.
By the way, I meant to mention that Joel is with Pattison. He does the programmatic up there for the huge out-of-home operator. And if you were on earlier, Joel, we talked about the Canadian Summit on June 16th. Look forward to seeing you and everybody there, and all your clients and everybody at the Scotiabank Theater.
We're looking forward to it.
Excellent. Can't wait to see it. Let's make sure we chat a little bit. We've got Andrea Rocca is also wonderfully appreciative of the 10 million. Andrea, we may have, well, I guess the question is, what got you down to the 10 from 30? And Andrea, where do you work again, Andrea? Silent, Andrea? Hello, Andrea? Okay, well.
I mean,
anyway,
I can answer the question.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure we're ever up in the 30 million range, but we've okay. So people say there's a lot. You're an aggregator of aggregators. So something that we spend a lot of time doing is a supply. Now we say we do it every 12 months, but honestly, it's like an ongoing. It's like perpetual. My dear brother's life, it is the bane of his existence. Is constantly understanding our supply, where we get it from, and how we can get the widest reach. So that's 70 million daily active users with a very high fidelity, meaning we see those events a lot every day. That is effectively what gives us the scale. Is when when we first started this, we were an SDK doing beacons, and we had like 1 million daily active users. So, I don't know if we could have even done a 30 million one, but by the time we got into market commercially with measurement, we're in the 10 million range, but now we're 7x that and at a higher fidelity. So 10 million is actually a fairly conservative one for us. So if they are down in the 30 million, I'm very confident that if there is a statistically significant lift to be measured, we would be able to detect it.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. And I should mention Andrea is from our member Firefly that has great advertising on ride sharing. An industry leader with an industry leadership thought from Kim Frank, suggesting we should all pull these attribution results from all DPWA members and create blinded norms from industry verticals. That is a leadership.
Barry, a private message is a private message.
Oh, is that to me only? It is. I think it's a great idea. Sorry. By the way, you got to be careful when you put things up here. It can go anywhere. But that is,
Lesson learned, man. Lesson learned.
I know that's a good idea though. But it's a good leadership thought. We can talk about that. Thank you, Kim, with lovely new red hair. Eric, ask your question. I'm not going to even repeat them anymore. I'll have Eric do it. Eric Kung. Say where you're from, everybody.
Sure. Eric Kung from Volta. We've done quite a bit of work, whether it's with Jonathan or with Craig and everybody else here, actually. I think impressions is actually a very bad way to kind of assess feasibility, because it really comes down more towards measurable devices, right? And so I've talked to Dylan quite a bit in the past about, getting additional metrics available like circulation, which would give us a better gauge of, how many devices are we actually seeing in a given area. And then ultimately it comes down to kind of the signal to noise ratio. So that's just my input.
Yeah, so impressions for us, geopath impressions are a proxy for our sample rate. And thus we know over a course of 10 million impressions, we're going to see a million devices over that campaign period. The problem where what you're talking about comes in, there's two problems that occur. One is if you're using bitstream data and it's not clean and there's a lot of noise to your point. But number two is the amount of time that you get it. We're getting 10 million impressions that all happen within a day, there's going to be a lot of the same devices. But again, these are feasibility guidelines. We always avoid calling them thresholds, because when you call them a threshold, people assume they're going to get the result they're looking for if they meet those impressions, that impression allocation. So when we say 10 million impressions, it actually solves for a couple of other things too, Eric. Somebody buying a campaign of 10 million impressions likely has a decent amount of traffic on the conversion environment side. Like that's one. And if they don't, then they're going to have a large magnitude of the lift. So it's again, I can't sit here and explain that, every time it gets asked. So what we set a bar and said 10 million is a very, it accounts for the conversion stuff or the magnitude of the lift stuff. If it's over, the usual course of it's going to be over at least 4 weeks, which should be good. So that's how we sort of established that feasibility guideline. Again, if you tell me you're giving me 10 million impressions in a day, it might not actually work out. And we'll tell you that.
Yeah, I want to chime in too, because I know Eric has been asking for this, and many people have been asking for this. We hear you, is that the circulation, OTS, and audience impressions are all very meaningful, especially when you start getting into programmatic, where there's maybe 1 out of 10 ads that is up there. So you got to sync your log data with the ad exposure and then put that in the context of thousands upon thousands of vehicles driving down the roadway when the ad's up. So yeah, that's important context to understand for you all of what your sample rates are as well for every asset. So we're working on that.
Great. Thank you, Dylan of Geopath. Any more questions or comments? Okay, well, I thank the opportunity to see all of you. That's an inside. Thank you. Thank you for laughing. It's an inside research joke. And we have the 10 million impression man, Jonathan Frangakis. And at the end of the day, it does prove that this stuff works. It creates lift. it helps sentiment, and we actually can see ROI. So Jonathan, serious thank you for all this. And if any questions, you could reach out to Jonathan at Mira. And good to see you all, and see you all in Canada a couple of weeks. See some of you in the Cannes Lions exhibition, and talk to your DPAA friendly folks for any more data and information. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.